All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm here with Danny,
Hi, everybody. Good to be here.
as Colleen is still in Japan, and I've talked to her, and she's going to be teaching with William Rand on Mount Karama here, starting I think next week. But she went a little bit early, and they're having a great time and getting adjusted to the time zone. And so I was able to catch up with her yesterday. So that was really fun. But she'll still be in Japan for a little while. I know she's been able to join us a time or two where she's been able to um, bring in the energy of the mountain, but we just never know how it's going to be. So hopefully we'll get to experience that, but we will see, no promises. A few announcements is one of the things actually that happened last week is we had so many questions about our topic of spiritual buzzwords, is that we will be continuing spiritual buzzwords topics. But last week was the attachments and everything to do with like spirit attachments, intrusions, things like that. And we had so many questions. We actually continued the conversation over on our live Q&A the next day. So we got a little bit more time to talk about it, so answer some of the questions that were posted in the chat here. So if you have more questions around it, you can always go to, it was released yesterday, so Monday's um, October's live Q&A, and we continue the conversation there. So in the show notes, it shows like the time breakdowns, like timestamps, so you can go and see if you want to just listen to that part, or if you want to listen to the whole thing. We talked more about it there. The other exciting thing that happened this week is, or I should say last week, is that our free webinar registration is up. So we will have a link to it in the description of this. The webinar this year is, we do one pretty much every year. It's November 18th, and that is on a Tuesday. So it'll be in place of the Distance Reiki Share. Everybody who registers will receive a recording. It's like 3 hours though, rather than the hour and a half that we spend here. So we'll be doing that on Tuesday, November 18th. If you normally come to the Distance Reiki Share, but you don't, you're at work and you can't listen for 3 hours, just register for it and you'll receive the recording. So even if you have to hop off at like the normal time, you can stay for maybe half of it or something like that. We also treat it casually. So if you have to come in late or leave early or something like that, you can go ahead and feel comfortable doing that. And then you will receive the recording, or if you can't make it that day, you'll receive the recording. But you do have to register for it separately than you already being registered for the Distance Reiki Share. So just an awareness of that. You also can go to our website, and it is reikilifestyle.com. And then under the Reiki Lifestyle Academy tab, you'll see like a menu option to go there, read more about it, learn more about it, and register for it there. We can't email you, but Daniel put a link in the chat. We will email the link out to the Distance Reiki Share group. So just so you know, if you come here live, we'll email that to you if you're on that list or whatever, that you receive the links. So that's really exciting. It is going to be an intro to journey techniques. So in August, we talked about that Reiki and shamanism and things like that, and kind of we talked a lot about that. So it's a continuation of that, and it talks about how the different styles of journey and what journeying is, and then even a bit of the how-tos around it, and then it will have a guided journey as well. So if you're interested or curious about Reiki journeying, some of you that have been through all of the next steps that are here might already know how to journey, but there's always things in there, plus the guided journey that you will receive with it, clearing limiting beliefs, things that might be stopping you either from receiving more intuitive insight, or different things in your Reiki practice, or different things in your life. We'll have the guided journey that is unique to that webinar. So if you have any questions, of course, feel comfortable emailing us, or go to the website to read more about it. All right. And then just the last thing is that we will be opening registration for Next Step and Explore the 12 Heavens that day as well. So November 18th, the registration will be open for that. And we only do registration once a year. So because they're year-long courses. So Next Step registration will be open November 18th to, I think it's like January. I really need to get my date straight for this. I keep saying this. January 18th or something similar to that. It's like right around there. And then classes start like that week. So they will start in January again. All right. I think that's good for the announcements for today. We, of course, have classes every week. We've got our Reiki merch line, all of those things. But I also want to get to today's topic at hand. And again, what we are continuing over these next few weeks are different spiritual buzzwords, different spiritual topics that you might have heard about, you might have even been trained in, but it's always an interesting perspective to see how we work with it through the Reiki energy. So, a lot of these topics, like attachments or cord cutting that we talked about last week, um, might be something that you're trained in like through a different modality, right? But how does Reiki energy do this work? How does it help you with it? Or if you're new to Reiki, or maybe just like you hear these things, maybe you're not new to Reiki, but you hear these things, and you're like, what the heck does that mean? That's what we are continuing to talk about. No, I think that was an accident, but I'm going to decline that request. If you are interested in recording this, if that was on purpose, we do record it and we release these on Thursdays. So on our YouTube or on our podcast. So you can go and revisit it there. Okay, so our spiritual buzzwords today: mediumship, channeling, telepathy, psychic impressions, intuition. They're kind of, it's hard to go into all of them in depth, but that is our overall topic because a lot of those things can be, like within the same framework of what they are. We talked in September a lot about intuition and psychic impressions. So you can go and look at that series if you want to learn more about that. So today's will be mostly about like the channeling, the mediumship, the telepathy, those kinds of things, as opposed to the psychic impressions and intuition. However, our intuition and our psychic impressions are also intertwined with these other things, with channeling, with mediumship, and how it all works for us. We've talked about our clear senses, so you can certainly learn more about that kind of thing on our previous series that we've done. So I think one of the biggest ones that we have or the biggest two out of all of these are channeling and mediumship. So these things can be talked a lot about in the spiritual communities. There are a lot of different kinds of trainings around them. This is an introduction to these concepts. And of course, you can learn more about them and Google them. And there's a lot of different ways to train around them. So the first ones I'm going to define them, and then we'll go into them in deeper. So channeling, that is when you are allowing higher consciousness, such as your higher self or spirit guides, ascended beings, divine energy, to speak through you, transmit wisdom, flow healing energy through you. This can occur through voice, writing, movement, silent energetic transmission. Now, the one thing to understand is that there's a lot of ways to channel. And channeling, when we are just doing Reiki, we are channeling Reiki. And when we're teaching about channeling, because our third year of Next Step is all about channeling techniques, right? How do you take everything that we're doing and you actually give voice to it? But channeling means so many different things, and it can look different in our Reiki sessions, our Reiki practice. Sometimes we can go into channeling in our daily lives. We channel journeys. We channel even as we're speaking here. We're doing channeling. So there's a lot of different ways to channel. I think how it's seen on, social media a lot, there's different kinds of channeling that way, but it really doesn't have to only be that. You also see people that are channeling like Abraham Hicks, those kinds of ways of channeling, and it can be to that level. It can also be a lot less complicated than that too, because we are already channeling. We are channeling Reiki energy. So, just an awareness that it's a very expansive term, and in some of these terms too, it is also about some unlearning around it and then relearning around it. We also have mediumship, which is receiving presence, communication, emotional impressions from spirit, of people who have crossed over. I think of mediumship as an expanded version of that, animals, ancestors, or other non-physical beings. They usually carry like maybe in a personality or very specific, like relational messages to the person. They might have an emotional aspect to them, emotional connection to them. But also, mediumship can be more than just how we think of it, of like mediumship of only um, people who have crossed over. It is that too. So, mediumship is one of those that you can have insights around Reiki energy, although it's also very helpful to receive additional training around. And as we know, like we've even had John Holland on the podcast, we've had Jules Davis on the podcast. They are trained psychic mediums in the way that we think of it, of like they are channeling people who have crossed over or animals that have crossed over. Mediumship also, though, is another one of those that can be an expanded term, because even if we are receiving messages from Reiki energy or receiving messages in those ways, that is a form of mediumship. And then we have telepathy. This is that mind to mind communication, or I would say even shared emotional thought resonance between living beings. We have the telepathy tapes that have come out. So that kind of gives you an expanded perception of telepathy. I think that there's a level of like animal communication that is a level of telepathy. We know that animals have telepathic communication, like wolves in their packs, right? Um, there has been research around that. So there's telepathic communication around that. I know, like, I'm not telepathic in my thoughts, but I certainly can pick up on um, like a thought before somebody texts me. And Colleen and I can be pretty telepathic in that way. Like, we hear each other when one of us is going to call the other or text the other, and we might pick up the phone and the other one calls. So that certainly can happen for us, but it's not like I can guess her thoughts, although I can be empathic to her and vice versa. And where that borders on with telepathy, there's like such an expanded version of this and how that works. And then also we have definitely seen a rise in the understanding of people who are nonverbal, and they can have this telepathic communication with people, and other people might experience telepathy and training around telepathy. You can see that there's people that are, as they have become, there's like training where um, they're blindfolded and they're doing a lot of things through their thoughts, understanding through their thoughts, and that is other training as well. So that's out there also. So all of these things are a part of spirituality. These things can be one of those things that you can develop skills around. Reiki energy can help you with developing skills around, you might see that some of these things open up within you once you're attuned to Reiki energy, because Reiki energy has a tendency to do that. Maybe they were either suppressed gifts or gifts from a past life, or you might have an interest in them and you decide that you would like to have more skill training around them. So maybe you don't have you never had like this idea of mediumship, but you're like, oh, this is something that I'm really called to, so I want to receive more training around this. I also do want to have a difference, especially with mediumship and channeling. Now, telepathy is one of those things that I will say Reiki has helped that develop within me. I notice it with texts. I notice it with my animals for sure. I notice it in those kinds of ways, in that non like verbal communication. However, I'm not as versed in telepathy outside of those few things as I am in mediumship and channeling. Um, but I do know that Reiki has developed my intuition. It's helped me, and through skill training as well. It's developed my intuition. And so I am able to have those things happen to me more commonly than when before I kind of took this path around it. And now I recognize it for what it is. It's, telepathic communication, and Reiki can really help open this. However, I'm not as like, there's some people that are very telepathic. And I wouldn't say that is something that I am at this point very good at. I don't even know if I want to. I got enough going on up here that I don't need like other people's going ons up here either. So I don't know. Maybe down the road. But mediumship and channeling, definitely, it's something that we teach in our next step classes, and something that I've trained in and all of that. I do also want to point out that if we're talking about mediumship and channeling, and if we're talking about that through beings, let's say beings, I want to point out the differences in how that can be done. So, one of the ways that channeling and mediumship can be done is through merging with the being or the spirit guide or something like that. And I will say that that is not how like we teach it. It's not how I prefer to do the work. I do get to also have sovereignty in those choices that I have um, with these two different skills. And so, you know, how we are doing it and how we teach these skills, and how we prefer to do our work is through the observation and allowing, like, so if I'm in mediumship where I'm talking to a past loved one, and what I'm going to be doing is like that person, and I say this proverbially, is standing in front of me, talking to me, telling me what they would like to relay, and then I relay that to the person that I'm working on, like in a session or something like that, where I'm not allowing that being to come in and merge with me, because that is not how I prefer to do my work. And that's even true with like the ascended masters, right? Still don't do it in that way. I just want to point out, because there's a lot of channeling that does it that way, and it's not a wrong or a right, it's just preference. And I do really feel like Reiki allows us to have these skills in a way that we don't have to do it that way, where we can go into the observation and relaying messages through this without having to allow that being to take over our voice with it. So that's one thing that I want to also talk about, because there are a lot of people that do it that way. And again, nothing wrong with that. It's all about preference, and how you use these skills. But I also like to talk about it because we see that style so much, just to know that you don't have to do that, and you can have this, you can do this work very effectively. Now, also, I also want to make sure that I'm clarifying it's not always beings. Like channeling is including Reiki energy, right? Or higher guidance or higher self. Or when we're doing guided journeys in these sessions, um, we're not only channeling that, but you might be going to, like, we go to locations, right? So you're going to the river of life and you are channeling information there at the river of life. So it's a location in the enlightened realms and you're channeling information from that location. So it's not always a being. Mediumship is more a being, right? But with the channeling aspect, it's not always a being. We also, when it comes to channeling, we also do a lot of automatic writing. We talk about our automatic writing, free writing. In our classes, we do a lot of automatic writing, especially as we're building our journey skills in level one. We do those here. We always talk about, like, if you would like to go into that writing, that free writing or automatic writing, you can do that. And the reason why is that is a precursor to channeling. It is a form of channeling. So we learn to do that first, and then eventually, I mean, some people still prefer to do it, but eventually you kind of take out that no pun intended, but that medium of the writing, and eventually you get to the point where it's just flowing through you, and you are giving voice to your observation. Or if you're doing a self journey, it depends on what mood I'm in, if I am writing something down or I am just in my observation of it. Now, at this point, sometimes I like to write it down because it's helpful to retain, or if I'm in my own way or really in my head and in that mind chatter, sometimes that free writing or that automatic writing can really help to shift that for me. Because what we're trying to do is we are trying to um, not evaluate and just allow the information to come through us. And again, if you think about what channeling is, that's what channeling is, right? It is allowing the information to come through you and not be in that, where you are really like evaluating it, where you are maybe even getting into like our own opinions, things like that, where we're kind of in our own human way around it. Now, um, it's not to say that, we don't, as our human self, like we live in a human realm. It's not to say that we don't have a voice on the team. We absolutely do. But when we are doing that, we are in the discernment about, like, okay, what here is me being in my own way, in that maybe that mind chatter, that monkey mind, or what is like me needing to know the very human perspective of this information that is coming in. So, some of the common questions that we have, uh, let me get to that. I want to say one more thing that's kind of coming through around it. I want to make sure. One of the things that I also really like doing with this work with Reiki energy is when we're journeying with Reiki energy, we are always going to the enlightened realms. So we talk about that with the third heaven or higher, the third level of consciousness, however you like to think about that, whatever words you use, we are going into the enlightened realms. When we are in those lightened realms, there's no duality. So when we're not in that duality, we can really go into that trust of Reiki energy. Um, and I like to journey. I like to do this work. I like to channel. I like to be in mediumship from that perspective. So I can be in that fully enlightened place where all there is love. All there is you know, beauty and joy and truth. Because sometimes, when you have the idea of mediumship, you can encounter maybe something or someone that comes through that maybe didn't have the most loving relationship with a person. So things like that can come through. But when I'm in the enlightened energy of Reiki, or I have my guides with me or around me, I know that I can always be in that huge level of trust and comfort that I will be able to ask the Reiki energy to, like, help, handle the situation with it all. So there is that aspect. Some of the things that come through for people too is how can I trust what I am receiving, or am I just imagining that it? This is one of those things that I say, first of all, we wouldn't make it like some of the things that come through. You're like, I could never make that up. I don't, I don't have the capacity or the imagination. Maybe some of us do, but like to make that up, it can be so out of left field that that is one of the first ways to know that you're not making it up. The other way that you can go into this is just through your discernment with it. And then I will say the other thing with it is time. Sometimes it just takes time. Um, and to know, and that validation, because like when I first started noticing how much with that telepathic communication with texts and phone calls, for example, of like my friends and family, it took me a while to be like, "Oh, okay, and is it that I'm thinking about this person, so they get that message and they text me, or vice versa?" I don't know. To me, again, that's chicken or the egg, I don't know. But there's that morphic resonance there, right? That it took me a while to know that when I get that feeling that's very strong about this person, it now either causes me to text them, or there's a text or a phone call that's coming in. Like there's a thought process that's happening that I am needing, or that's happening and they're needing it or I'm needing it. It just kind of depends. Um, so that's another thing. But sometimes it just takes time and the validation of that knowing, and the experiences that happen. Another thing that can really happen to people, especially if you're very sensitive, or some of you have had the gift of having being able to like see through the veils. So mediumship, you can feel or see, or however your clear senses with spirits, especially if you're in like a location that is a um place that spirits are hanging out. And so there can be a fear of even being able to like turn it off. This is another thing that to know that you can have skill training around. So it can be helpful for you con- to continue. If you have those gifts, it's not just something that you have to just accept that it's like the good and the bad. Like you can get skill training around it so that you can know what to do when it happens. As Colleen says, like she has office hours, right? I don't want to have to go into the local haunted hotel. We've talked about this, Edgefield here in Portland, like the local haunted hotel, and have to have the experience of the spirits that hang out there. I have office hours. I'm personally like people love to go and stay in like one of the really haunted rooms there. I'm personally not going to do that. Like it doesn't scare me or anything, but I'm not personally going to do that because like I have off hours, right? And so that's one of the things that you can also have that conversation with Reiki, conversation with your guides, around it, that you have your office hours, like you have your on hours and your off hours. Now, with people that have these natural gifts, sometimes that's a little easier said than done. Um, but definitely bring in that light of Reiki energy, spirit guides, things like that to let them know, like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Like I don't want to have to pick up on this all the time. And then also again with the skill training, it can help you grow in that confidence. There's other skills around that you can have, that can be very helpful to you. It's not just something that like you have to fully accept that it happens to you all the time without consent, like things like that. Um, so there's that. Um, and the safety aspect, that again is where that discernment comes in. That's where that skill training is. That's where you can also utilize the light of Reiki. It is an enlightened energy. There's no duality within the light of Reiki. So it is safe, but it's also helpful to know differences. It's also helpful to have discernment. It's also helpful to know what to do. It's also helpful, like there is so much that you can learn about, that you can do. However, you can also just bring in the Reiki energy and continue to have the intentions with it. Like sometimes I'm not going to say it's like, okay, you bring in the Reiki energy and it takes care of it like in one 15-minute session or whatever. Sometimes it does take some time to build the skill, to build the intentions, to build the trust and the confidence in it. Um, that is a part of this path for some of us. Um, especially when, like I've been saying, that you have natural aptitudes towards this. And maybe you can even see that that runs down like a lot of times it's a maternal line or the paternal line that is from the paternal grandmother or something like that. You do see that with some of these things as well. The other thing that I also want to make sure that people know is that this doesn't like you don't have to do any of this work. You may not have an interest in it to be a good practitioner or healer. Um, Reiki energy heals and does its work outside of any of these things. And so that is something we always like to say, because you might get into Reiki energy and you hear these things and like, wait, what? Like, I don't either want to do that or I don't know what those things are. And like, does that mean that I can't have really effective and beautiful sessions that are extremely healing for people? Absolutely not. Like Reiki energy on its own is enough. And as a Reiki practitioner, it is enough for the level of healing that can happen for people that is even life-changing, right? So just so you know, I want to always make sure that we honor the Reiki energy and what it does on its own. We talk about this because it happens for people, or people are drawn to Reiki energy because they might have gifts that have brought them in because they need to know how to manage it, or it's just this idea that, like, okay, healing energy is something that can help me or be good for me, and they might already have like this introduction to spirituality in some way, shape, or form, even if this is having these gifts from the time that they were a child. And so it brings them to Reiki energy. And we talk about this too because we are specifically trained in these techniques, and train others in these techniques, and helping people to have these skills or manage these skills depending on kind of what perspective you come from. Like I don't think that other than talking to animals, which I have learned so much through animal Reiki. I don't like I've not had like gifts of mediumship or seen, spirits or things like that. It's more for me that I was like interested in learning skills around this so that I know what to do with it when it would like come up in sessions and things like that. And especially channeling, because channeling has always been a big interest to me. I would say that those gifts, those things might have happened a little bit more when Colleen started doing shamanism, and I would be doing those things with her and learning at a young age and things like that. So channeling in my life was not so much in those kinds of in like a spiritual thing, but those two, but channeling in my life, I was definitely had more of an aptitude towards that I actually kind of turned away from for a long time. But I do think that's also because of the way that I was raised with it all. So that one did have me more interested in, just because I wanted to know how to channel out loud. I wanted to know how to do sessions where I was channeling out loud. I wanted to know how to do it when I was teaching. I wanted to know how to do it in my relationships with my child, with my friends, with my husband, things like that. When I needed to switch into that level of higher wisdom, that was something that did interest me. And so I wanted to learn the skills around it. Um, So that is something that was important to me, and I was the same. Like even though I was able to do it a little bit when I was younger, I also had to come back to it. And so starting with automatic writing was a huge piece for me because of that brain that gets in my own way around it. The automatic writing was it was a game changer for me originally with it all. Um, and so again, it really is just whether you're interested or whether you have your own um, stuff that goes on in your practice that you might want to learn, like how to manage it, things like that. But you do hear about these things. You can be on social media and you can see people that are channeling to the camera. They can be maybe channeling from spirit, or they might be channeling like light language, things like that that you see and you think, oh, first of all, do I have to do that to be a good practitioner? No. But you also might see that and be like, oh, I wonder how they do that. So there's a lot of ways to do this. There's a lot of effective ways to do this. But that's like an overarching idea, general way to kind of know about it, to define it, and also how Reiki energy um, helps us to develop it, and that we can do it through Reiki energy as well. Okay, well, Danny, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. So I never considered myself a channeler at all. I always had thoughts in my head when I was doing sessions and stuff, but I never thought of myself as that. And, you know, seriously, after taking the classes, and I'm not saying you have to because people just know it before they do any classes, right? They just have that feeling. But uh, I got the confidence of being able to say what I was feeling. And so from all of my sessions, I do automatic writing. I mean, that is something I love. And I know there are some people who don't get into it, they don't care. But that to me is so exciting because I don't know what we're going to talk about. I have no idea what's going on typically with the client. And just to be able to I usually take about 20 minutes before a session and do automatic writing. And I work a lot with chakras, so I go through the energy centers of the client. And so it's very interesting for me. What comes up is it makes sense. And it's nothing about me. I mean, I'm not doing any of it. It's just like, oh, I'm hearing this, or I'm seeing it. For me, it's a lot of words. And so I think that just getting that confidence is really important. And automatic writing for me works. And there's other things too, but automatic writing for sure. And I think we all have those visions, or we all have those ideas, and we sometimes we don't talk about them because we're like, oh no, that's so crazy. That makes no sense. And so now to me, it's more fun when it doesn't make sense. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm feeling. And I don't have to be right, but it might spark a conversation.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Beautifully said.